Today is Friday, September 15th, 2023, and you have found the Living Youth Podcast. Sitting here at the table with my co-host each time, Mr. Robinson. Mr. John Robinson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. I hope so, because you seem fine so far.
Well, it's
leading up
Friday, sunset, start trumpets. I'm ready. The fall weather is hitting today. A nice cool day. It just gets you ready.
I agree. I'm pumped about trumpets, and I'm excited about tonight. I'm also excited about our special guest. We were just talking about what a special guest he is today. We have visiting with us someone. Actually, before we say your name, you want to say hello to everyone, special guest?
Well, hello. Glad to be on the podcast.
Now I'm starting to wish you weren't on because you have a much more radio voice than I think either of us do. But very nice to hear from you. Our special guest today is Mr. Rod McNair, and we're going to be talking about his role in church administration, specifically working hard with his team on this very thing we're all looking forward to observing here in a few weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back. And again, we're here with Mr. Rob McNair in Mr. Robinson's office. Mr. Robinson, thank you for, those of you out there don't realize if you haven't seen a picture, but the podcast table just takes up all this space in Mr. Robinson's office, and he doesn't seem to mind at all.
No,
thank you.
I wasn't using it anyway, so.
And Mr. Rod McNair, we know you're very busy. In fact, you have a class, you said, coming up for?
Living ed.
Living ed. All right. So we definitely don't want to take too much of your time.
It's for the second year seminar class, which is just sort of a smattering of different topics. I think, Mr. Smith, you'll be doing something on evolution
next week.
Will you be for it or against it?
Oh, a spoiler alert. I don't know. I'm against it, just so you know. I'm against it.
Well, I'm just completing a four class series on Assyria and Germany. So we'll be finishing that today.
Okay.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
We appreciate the book that you and Dr. Cornell put together. Is your class kind of like an extension of that? Does it go into some additional facts or information or?
Yeah, it really just sort of touches on the highlights of what's in the booklet.
Great. Okay. Oh, that's good. I now wish I could go back and sit in, but I want to focus. You are here because we want to grill you a bit concerning behind-the-scenes work with the Feast of Tabernacles, because here at headquarters, Mr. Robinson and I get the opportunity to hear about some of those things and in meetings, etc., but our teens and young adults who are out there probably don't realize sometimes just how much work goes into it and how much work has been done ahead of time to help the rest of us have a wonderful feast. So we want to ask you some questions about that, but before that, I thought it'd be a nice bridge. Last time, Mr. Robinson, what was our topic last podcast?
We talked about our I think we each went through our three favorite feast memories.
That's right, because I was planning on doing two, and then you said one. I had to do three. That's right. So
no,
you did good.
Competition.
So we talked about some favorite feast memories, and no pressure. It doesn't have to be your most favorite, but before we launch into this, you are a feast goer yourself, not just a feast planner.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a favorite feast memory that you'd be willing to share with us?
Well, I'm thinking of two. One is growing up when we were kids. My siblings and I, we would normally go to Wisconsin Dells. We lived in Milwaukee, and for about 9 years in a row, we went to the Dells. That was our assigned site. My dad was the coordinator during some of those years. And just a lot of good memories together. My grandparents would get a room next to ours, and we went to this same little. It was called the Rainbow Motel. It was one of those sort of mom and pop little places, and just had a lot of good memories with my grandparents, and then we were involved in the orchestra, and so a lot of good memories there in the Dells. The other more recent one, I would say, is with my family when we had the opportunity several years ago to go to the Philippines as a family.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty exciting because our oldest daughter had been born there, and then she and our son and the next daughter had gone to the Philippines as infants,
Wow.
carried or very, very small toddlers back when I was involved over there. But we had not been back since. So it was really exciting to take them over and to sort of show them things that we had seen over there and introduce them to people that we knew
That'd be neat.
that were very precious. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that would be really neat. Okay, but now the grilling starts. That was your one.
Okay.
That was your one softball. Ms. Robinson, you want to start? Want me to start? What do you how you want to play?
Sure. No, I'll go ahead and,
All right.
and go next. Let's see. So I think at sunset this evening we'll be 2 weeks away from the beginning of the feast.
Wow.
Now it's like the payoff for all the work and preparation and everything you've done. How do you feel like the festival work has shaped up this year?
Yeah, for this year specifically.
I think I think it's gone pretty smoothly. I think overall things are. We have just such a great team, and I know that's on one of the questions that you mentioned in the prep. We have people who work really hard and do their job well in preparing, and of course, all over the country and around the world, coordinators who are working and really doing the heavy lifting for it, and so. It's gone pretty smoothly. I think the 2020 disaster. After that, every year feels good. When we had in midstream, we had to make all kinds of adjustments. So anything short of that is wonderful.
I was genuinely impressed with how well that you guys pivoted to going from what is it, 15 sites to suddenly needing to have 30, so many little smaller sites to accommodate the limitations of COVID. I think the one we went to here had I think North Carolina had like a 200 person limit. And we still had to spread out. We were in actually that facility was really nice, and it was so big that we were easily able to spread out in distance and everything. But I for what it's worth, I was really impressed at how well y'all pivoted to a very suboptimal situation.
We
Good word for it.
kind of we reversed the magazine at that time. We were going to publish a whole bunch of different articles, and it was obvious, no, we need to publish on this. And so turning the magazine around was rough enough, but I admit that whole time planning for the feast, at least more than once, I know, at least once, I remember thinking, it is a delight not being Rod McNair right now. We really felt for you and your team. We know that was a lot of work. And went well. We had a wonderful feast where we were, the places we went, and appreciate all of that. I know it was difficult. In fact, you said something there. Let's go ahead and skip to that question, because we did want to let you know we want to find out who's on your team. And I was going to ask that next, but let's go ahead and say that, because if I understand you're probably chomping at the bit to make sure people know it's not just you running around taking care of all these details. You do have a team that really makes it all possible. What is your team? What is that team that works on the feast site preparation?
Well, a couple of years ago, and might be more than now, the time goes by, but we hired Tyler Wayne in CAD, and he's my assistant, I guess, the best way to describe it. And he really sort of spearheads the effort, and Mark Smith is super involved. He in IT or in whatever. I guess that would be IT in the computer area. Mark has been doing it for whatever it's been, 15, 17 years, just about all the time that I've been here, and just puts in a tremendous amount of time and work into it. And then Tressie, our daughter, works in CAD and festival as well, and she does a lot of the support things for Tyler. I would say that the three of them are probably do most of the lifting here in the office. Of course, it touches so many other people, but they really, really carry the ball. And frankly, the last couple of years, I've really been able to to be a little bit more in the shadows as they take care of a lot of the details. So it's they're very dependable, and I really, really appreciate their work.
Well, we all do. We all appreciate that, and it's weird to hear talk from Tyler or someone about this contract or that contract, and then to discover it's not even, for this year or something. It's so far in advance. How far in advance do you guys have to work for the fee sites?
Yeah, so the goal is to have everything signed at least 1 year ahead. So here we are, Feast 2023, and the goal is that he is wrapping up the last couple of contracts for 2024.
Wow.
So that's sort of the minimum, because if you are looking around for a hall and you aren't a year ahead, you're probably going to have a hard time finding something.
Really?
And so normally we're looking out a couple of years ahead, but then by the time you finalize everything, it's a year and a half. And then a few stragglers come in just about a year. The hard part with that is, especially when you're doing a new site, it's a little awkward to have to book a couple of years in a row when you haven't even been there yet. So that's a challenge, because it'd be really nice to try it one time,
right,
and then regroup and say, okay, do we want to do it again? You don't really have that luxury because these places get booked up. So at least a year in advance.
Wow.
So maybe you could elaborate a little on some of the criteria you have to use to select the fee sites. I mean, I remember when I was much younger and I had no idea. It was kind of a mystery as to how the fee sites were selected, but knowing a little bit more about the process, geographic concerns, how is this site close to how many members, and what kind of facility do they have? Well, like, just all the different things that you have to factor in. It's not as simple as, hey, it would be really great to go to this amazing city. It doesn't work that cleanly.
Right.
What do you have to consider when you're selecting a fee site or considering one for future use?
Yeah, that is a really good question, because I think for probably a lot of people, it's like, hey, I know of this town, nearby. Why don't they pick that as a fee site? Well, when you start looking at all the things that have to go into it, for example, I've often, my apologies to everyone who lives in Cleveland, but I've often said, we're not going to put a fee site right in the middle of Cleveland, and then one time I realized there was someone from Cleveland in the audience that I was talking to, so I immediately apologized. But
hey, I used to pastor all those nice folks.
That's
in Cleveland.
right.
Hey,
there are a lot of nice
you
people up
Cleveland.
there. So if anyone's listening from Cleveland,
don't
I'm
take
sorry.
it personally. That's right.
Please
That's
don't.
Right. I think if you're living in Cleveland, like some areas of the country, you're used to it. It's like, we get it. We understand.
Sure. Well, and that's the funny thing, because when you talk about, let's say, business conventions, they're going to go downtown. To
Right.
a lot of cities, they're going to be in the middle of downtown, and of course we've done that sometimes in the past. In Tucson, I remember we were at when I was a teenager, we were at a big convention center right downtown. But generally, that's not our model. That's not generally the downtowns of American cities and all over the world are not sort of the millennial setting we're looking for. So we're, right off the bat, we're looking for something that is millennial, that it is going to be, the creation is going to be around us as we go and walk in the door, opening night, maybe in the mountains or near the ocean. It's a nice setting. Lots of greenery, that sort of thing. So that's one criteria. But it also needs to be near a major metro area, because you've got to fly in, or you've got to have good roads to get there. So you can't just put it out, in the boondocks somewhere. It also needs to be close enough to good housing. adequate, reasonable, low-cost housing, especially for our brethren who are on a really tight budget, and a lot of families. You just can't go anywhere. You really need to have a good selection. Well, that pretty much takes out most of the ski resorts. Those beautiful places that have nice housing, but don't have a wide range of housing. So, a number of things like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And, I was just thinking because, you talked about Tucson. My wife and her family, they love to go to Tucson. And it reminded me, like a lot of our younger listeners wouldn't have this understanding or experience. When we were growing up in Worldwide Church of God, the numbers were so much higher. You're talking about, I want to say my recollection is when we went to Corpus Christi, which there's a site near Corpus this year, we met in a downtown convention center that would hold, I think, 8,000 people, and we probably had 6,000 people in there. I mean, that's you're talking about almost as big as the church is now.
Yeah.
Because what Worldwide at its peak was somewhere around 150. And so we had huge feast sites with thousands of people at them. And now, so you couldn't even use those facilities, really, a lot of them, the bigger convention centers. Well, I guess you could get sections of them. But, and then other things that people don't, oh, no, you go ahead.
No.
Well, like, why are there 2 feast sites in Florida? Well, have you ever driven the length of Florida? That's a long state. The Panhandle is really far away from southern Florida. So I started to appreciate the considerable logistics for planning feast sites when I started thinking about it myself.
Right.
It needs to be near where the members are. You need to have a facility that reasonably fits the size of the group we have, which in most cases is going to be 500 or less, wouldn't you say? And it has to have housing. There's lots of cute little boutique towns that you would go do a day trip to, but there's nowhere you could stay.
Right.
Yeah. My wife and I were talking about a place like that just recently, and we thought that, this would be really nice. But that was one of the drawbacks, was where would people stay? And there's a lot of things I know you have to consider. And Mr. Weston wrote an article in the Living Church News that just came out. Hopefully those listening, you've got it there at your house. But he actually tackles some of this up front in his personal, which he titled, "How Does God Place His Name?" Because we can talk about all these factors and such, but part of what we do understand is it really isn't just a matter of, well, where does Wallace Smith want to meet, or Rod McNair, or John Robinson, or for that matter, Gerald
I could
Weston.
put together a list.
Yeah, that's right. It's not just that. In the end, what we really want is to be where God has placed his name. Now, to a great extent, God tends to often show where he plays, and Mr. Weston covers this in the article. That's part of what you're also trying to do, is you're asking God to guide you, to help us find where he would like us to meet. And is he going to want us to meet in some place that's completely unsuitable? That doesn't exactly make sense. You're not excluding him from the process. Just like when you're asking God to help you find a mate, you still do the hard work of trying to be a good future spouse yourself, and also trying to think about, well, who should I marry, etc. So you're not cutting that out. If anything, God is a part of that. But I've also heard tales here and there, and I feel like at least one, like whenever I was asked to do Branson, way back in 2006, I guess it was, because the feast was going to be in Paducah. And it was planned for Paducah. We're literally just months away from the feast in Paducah, and it just fell apart. Everything just collapsed. I think the place went bankrupt, everything. And so next thing I know, I'm getting a call from, at the time, is Mr. Davy Crockett, saying, "Hey, WG, you want to run a feast? We need you to run a feast." And we're thinking of Branson. And that's the first year we had it there in Branson for quite some time. And that was my first time even running a feast. But I kind of got the sense from some that sometimes God sort of opens doors and closes doors, and it seems kind of obvious he's done that. Like there's places where we really want to go, and it's like, man, we keep knocking on that door, but God does not want to open that door. And there's other times where, like Branson, I've heard come up here and there, and it's like, well, in the end, we got shoved kind of into Branson to a certain extent. It was not part of the plan, and yet it was the place that would still accommodate everybody. Do you have any sense of those kind of moments where the best laid plans of mice and men, kind of come up against God's plan, and where he seems to be making it plain, yeah, this year, I'm closing this door, opening that one. Does that make any sense, that question?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And I just, as we're sitting here, I'm thinking back to, I don't have any, dramatic
Right.
examples, but it's just, it's so true that oftentimes when you're looking in a region and you're sending out feelers, you're doing the research, and most of the responses are no, and so whether it's the price or whether it's the different factors that we've already talked about, and it just never ceases to amaze when you're getting no, 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 and then you contact a particular hall, and it's like maybe their price is high like the others, and you start talking, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can do that. Oh yeah, we can accommodate you for that. Oh yeah, we'd love to have you for that." And so you just think, wow, a totally different mindset and attitude, even in the staff, in the sales people who are
Interesting.
who are willing to work and willing to make adjustments. I guess I've always to me, it makes sense that if I were a salesman and in a hotel industry like this, and I hear about 500 or 600 people coming in for 10 days, for 9 days, total 8 days during the meetings. You can add up the dollars, and that's a sizable amount. And so it does strike me oftentimes when some don't see the value of that. Now, granted, oftentimes they can make more money with a couple of weekends of weddings.
Oh, really?
And that is a big part of the challenge, as I think Mr. Weston brings out in that article, that weekends are weddings, and so we get knocked out of places because of that.
Right.
But yeah, there are times when we're in one site and we're actually trying to get out of that site because the people who are local who don't have the means to transfer, they're going there year after year after year. And that's okay. That is, oftentimes we can build a relationship with people,
Right.
with the staff, and you don't want to just throw that away.
Right.
But after a number of years go by, we also want to try to let those who can't go other places have some variety. But it's just amazing how we look and we look and we look and we look and we look, and yeah, no, this is the only
This is
door
the
that is
place.
open. So that's it for now.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith and I talked about in our reminiscing of our favorite feast sites towards the end of the podcast. We talked about, because we'd had some similar experiences. Increasingly, I found it's last year you needed help somewhere, and so we went to Sandusky, which was not originally on our list. Fantastic one. And I think about ones that are a little less glamorous, like Northern Kentucky. We were there a couple of years. We went there that year. That also, like if we'd have done a longer podcast with more feast sites, I would have worked that one in as well. So some of these sites that are not so obvious have been some of my favorite feasts.
Yeah. It makes a difference that when God wants you there. In fact,
Yeah.
one day He might say, you know what, Cleveland. It's got to be Cleveland. Can't,
After as many times as I've used that example, I'm probably going to be going to Cleveland. It's one of these days for the
Yay,
feast.
you hear
Well,
that, brethren, there
okay,
in Cleveland.
but
let me put in a plug
we
for Cleveland.
love everyone in Cleveland.
That's right.
I just want to emphasize that.
Well, when Audrey and I drove, because we drove up, and we stayed the night in Akron because that was just a natural stopping point. And then when we're headed out to the feast site, we drove straight up to Cleveland because we had a grocery store. We wanted to go there, and it was surprisingly close to the lake there. And we drove down to just a beautiful park, and it was a nice sunshiny day and breezy, and it was so pleasant. It felt so feast-like. And then we kind of drove along. There's a little highway that kind of goes along the lake there that you can go on.
You
Such
know,
a good feast.
The comedian Drew Carey, when he had a television show way back when, I think called the Drew Carey Show. I'm
He
not
was from
recommending
Cleveland,
it.
wasn't
Yes,
he?
I think he
Yeah.
was, and I'm not recommending the show. I saw it in my youth. I can't tell you about the content, but I do. They had their theme song was Cleveland Rocks, if I recall. So I can see maybe just before Christ returns, maybe one feast there where God is thinking, McNair, this
This
one's
one's for you. That's right.
Okay, we know you've got other things to do. If you just indulge us one more time, we just have one more quick question, because what might be an aspect of festival preparation, office work that might be the most surprising behind the scenes for those who have no idea? We know there's a lot of work done, and clearly there's contracts to be done, but and if there's nothing, that's fine. It'll just make us all feel smart that we're like, oh yeah, it's everything we would think it would be. But is there any particular aspect of festival office work that might be most surprising for those who don't have the chance to see everything you guys have to do?
I think the biggest thing, is probably, when you're a kid, like growing up in the church, like we have here, you go to the feast, and you show up at opening night, and everything's set up, and you walk in, and there are seats there, and the piano is playing, and there are people walking around talking, and then the song leader gets up and announces, okay, we'll be starting soon, and you start and you sing, and everything just works. And it's like, wow, yeah, this is I'm at the feast. This is great. And you see your friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a few years go by, and then if you have an opportunity to be a part of any part of the feast serving, you realize, wow, that opening night thing just didn't start on its own,
Right.
If you're in ushering, or if you're in the choir, or if you're in, the whatever you're serving, you realize, boy, there's a lot of work that goes into this. And I would say that just keeps increasing. Then if you're the coordinator of a feast site,
right.
and like I think we've talked about, you've experienced that it's really incredible to see behind the scenes all of the pieces come together, everybody working together, and it also is kind of I one way I've described it is about 2 weeks before, right about now, as the coordinator, you start having at 2 a.m. you wake up in a cold sweat. It's like, what have I forgotten?
Right.
The train is coming, and it's almost upon me. What have I forgotten? And I think that maybe is just the biggest thing, that for everything that, when we show up at the feast, when we show up in an activity, when we participate in what's going on, for everything that happens, there were 100 details that somebody took care of behind the scenes. And maybe that's the best way that I can summarize we all know that,
Right.
but until you actually then serve on a crew and do stuff, you don't really understand it.
It's not
And
real to you how much work has been put in.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the benefit of the doubt that I knew there was a bunch of stuff that went on behind the scenes. But I try not to stretch this out too far, but I loved what you just said, because it was precisely the experience I had. In my 20s, I would just show up at the feast, and how did the feast just manifoldly present itself so perfectly? It was just amazing that this feast was presented for me to come and have a great time at the feast. And then in my 30s, and we mention Phil Senna all the time, but friend of the podcast, Phil Senna, asked me to help him with the feast in New Braunfels one year. I was probably in my early 30s, and wow, what an eye opener it was. And then we helped him for 4 out of 5 years, or 5 out of 6 years, something like that. And the feast would end, and invariably within a month we would have our first meeting about what we're going to do next year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how, at least with how Mr. Senna did it. We're pretty early meeting after the feast to talk about maybe some pros and cons and break things down and what can we do next year. And we may not meet again for a while, but the planning never stopped in some respects, and it was a healthy respect I developed for how much work and how many people, tons of volunteer time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we were at when the camp was in Ohio and it was at the Boy Scout camp. The Boy Scouts leaders, like national leaders, approached us and said, "How do you get so many volunteers to come and work at your camp? They can't get them. They have to pay people." And so that's one of the things I also appreciated was how much volunteer work goes into the feast, and it's just God's people, dedicating their time. And it was such a good experience. If you're young, especially if you're younger, since it's the youth podcast, man, when you get an opportunity, when somebody asks you to do something at the feast, even if it's something that starts out that's a little more basic, maybe helping in the parking lot or something like that, not to minimize the importance of that, take it and do it. You'll have a better feast. I found that was another thing. I felt like, as fun as it was when I was in my 20s to show up at the feast and have a great time, it was so much more rewarding to me personally when I was involved in it.
Exactly. That's what I was going to... You made me think of that very thought. As great as the feast is, when you're just participating, it just gets better and better when you're actually a part of it. When you're actually in the background serving, and it's not always fun to go, to an early choir practice or to show up a couple hours or plus early to set up the sound. But there is nothing like the camaraderie of working together with people on a crew, and then the satisfaction of seeing people stream through the door, and their experience is going better because of what you as a crew did.
One of the things I had to learn was really the best compliment you could get that your feast site went well is you just didn't hear any really complaints.
Yeah.
Right.
Some people are nice and they'll say, "Oh, thank you," but a lot of times, really, the litmus test to me seemed to be you didn't get complaints. Oh, we did pretty well this year.
Yeah, that's a
or,
good
or few complaints.
That's a good point.
Yeah, in a little way, I don't want to stretch this too much, but isn't it kind of like a picture of what we hope for the millennium? I think of those feasts and how joyful they'll be for the people showing up. I mean, some of them we know may not want to come at first, and God will encourage them through a variety of means to know you need to send people to Jerusalem. This is what we do. But after a while, they will learn and how joyful it's going to be, what kind of displays of celebrations from different cultures, but yet within the overall picture of the law of God, it's going to be beautiful, and the whole world is going to get to enjoy the kind of sense that we get to enjoy at the feast. But for us, those in the church, what do we long to be able to do? Not to actually just go to the feast in Jerusalem to observe it. We long to be a part of God's family, actually making it happen for everybody else. Really, in the end, isn't that what we want? I don't want to just show up at the feast anymore like I'm doing in this life. I want to be helping Christ put the feast on for everybody else. And so in a little way, it's kind of a picture of that.
Absolutely. And isn't that what we're supposed to be connecting the dots to see? That a very, very tiny foretaste, because if you have 600 people at a site, that's a big site these days,
Right.
Well, in the city or in the environs of where you are, you probably have a couple million people. So, this is just a very, very small taste of what's coming. And if I could add also, I just piggybacking on what Mr. Robinson mentioned a moment ago, as far as encouraging our young people, if any of them are listening, if you've never sort of stepped out of your comfort zone and been a part of a crew at the feast or served or volunteered, do it. Just do it. On opening night, if the coordinator in the announcement says, we need some more ushers, we need some more people on whatever in parking, we need some more people to take care of the stage. Raise your hand. I mean, not literally at that moment. It might be during the announcements, but do it. You will not regret it. It's going to put you out of your comfort zone a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time, but this is the time to
for sure.
step out,
Mhm.
and there's just so much joy in seeing that you are helping other people, and you don't even need to be on an official crew to do it. Just if you see an older lady walking through the door, struggling with the door, run up and open the door, or
Yeah.
offer to push the wheelchair, that as they're getting out of their car or whatever. This is the time to do that.
I'm not again endorsing this movie, but the kids watched it a lot when they were young. The movie Robots. It's an animated movie.
Mhm.
All I know is there's so many movies I only heard 8 to 18 times because we're driving, and they're
Yeah,
watching something.
yeah.
But there was a line in that movie that I remember where
Why be you if you can be new?
no,
Sorry.
do you know that's that a line from
I've
the
never
movie?
seen this movie.
Oh, you haven't? No,
I'm
it's
betraying the fact that I've actually
You've
seen
also
it.
heard it. Well, I don't know if I've actually seen it beginning to end, but I've
Sorry.
heard it so many times. No,
Yeah.
that must
Go
be their
ahead.
advertising, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was no, it's the Big Weld character who says, "See a need, fill a need." I
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah,
and I
that's
thought, well, that's actually,
That's right.
yeah, that's nice, and that's what if I recall, the main protagonist kind of tried to do. If you
Yeah.
see a need, fill a need, and boy, that kind of attitude, try to take not just, hey, I want to go have a bunch of fun this
Right.
feast, but no,
Right.
I'm actually going to try to keep an eye out for
Mhm.
needs, and I'm going to do my best to fill those needs.
Right.
It makes it my very first feast. I'd never done anything like this before, but they needed people for security, and I'm young and 18. By then, actually, I was 19, and so just walking around the campsite at Big Sandy, providing security, and I don't know, didn't have a gun or anything, but still,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, what do I watch for? I just keep an eye out. Well, okay.
Snakes.
Yeah, exactly. But
Raccoons.
that's right. But I will say, I felt it felt good to know I was pitching in some way.
Yeah.
I was a part of the effort.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, I hope we all will take that encouragement from Mr. McNair and Mr. Robinson and do that. And that's it. That's all we had planned for. Unless you
Yeah.
have anything else, Mr. Robinson.
I would just say, genuinely thank you for the work that you do in CAD. And it's a lot of work that gets done that people don't see. It's like if you had a poorly run feast site, everybody would notice that. But when they run really well, you just think, oh yeah, the feast went fine. And I know a ton of work goes into it. I know some of the members of your team and the work they put into it. And like you've had some fantastic additions lately to your team, and appreciate the considerable effort that goes into planning and putting on the feast, and that 10,000 of us will travel to it and enjoy it this year. So. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and please pass on our thanks to your whole team, and thank you for taking the time out to come chat with us.
Absolutely. It's been fun.
Smith and Robinson.